So thank you very much for the invitation. So I'm very glad to be here with you at SIA. So the idea of this morning is to give you big pictures of different questions in machine learning, with some basic introduction to machine learning at first. So first, a silly question: what is machine learning? So a basic definition could be the goal of machine learning will be to design algorithm to build model, for example, to... T'es la seule qui a autorisé à enlever ton masque. J'ai le droit d'enlever mon masque. OK. OK. So machine learning is a nice field since it is at the intersection of several scientific domains. So I assume that in this classroom there is a mathematician, computer scientists, people from the signal processing community. And in fact, all these fields are useful to learn or to build new models to have more information on possible unstructured data. And it is the aim of machine learning. So now I will give you several examples of what can be done with machine learning, several examples coming from several areas as NLP, computer vision, signal processing, and so on. So the first one is an example that I like very much. It is NLP. It is a sentiment analysis in this case. So imagine that you have a collection of tweets, so maybe that you connect online, and what you want to know is there a positive or a negative sentiment that can be associated to this tweet? So for example, imagine that you are reading this first tweet. So as you may see, the sentiment will be a positive one. So techniques behind the sentiment analysis are techniques that will introduce Edouard related to deep learning and word embedding. I will talk a little tomorrow about, I will introduce a little word embedding for those who are interested in. And the idea is to represent words, represent unstructured data as text in an unsupervised manner, and to associate to each word or to each sentence, to associate in a relevant way, capturing the semantic, the high-dimensional vector. So it is a first application of machine learning. And as you may see here, the core of the problem, the key question is how can we represent in a relevant way, for example, words or sentences or documents. So it is a very hard question because you want to, in a text, you have very different things that enters into play, like semantics, sense of the word, but also structure, grammar, and so on. And we try to do so. People of the NLP community try to use deep learning in a relevant way to represent this kind of data. So it is a first nice application of machine learning, which is text analysis. And for example, you can predict sentiment. A second example is more related to the time series analysis. So imagine for that, for example, you want to predict urban traffic. So here you have a motorway, for example, and you want to be able to take into account possible accident, change in traffic depending on time, on months, on vacations. And you want to take all that into account and to have a model that helps you to predict what will be the urban traffic next hour, for example, or next month, or next weekend. And as you may think, this could be a difficult task. So imagine, for example, that you have data, and in this data, you imagine that are included, for example, for example, traffic during the lockdown. Okay, so it will be a difficult task because you have to, for example, input missing data. You have to think about how you will deal with the specificity of lockdown, with the specific period, and to take into account that even. And how, for example, now can we predict if there is another lockdown? How can we predict the impact on the traffic, for example? So, as you may see, this question could be a difficult one, and there is also one also could use deep learning techniques as a sequence-to-sequence neural network to do so. And Edouard is here, so he will tell you everything about that. Another interesting application, it is computer vision. So there is a lot of applications of machine learning in computer vision. And a nice example is this of face recognition. So for example, if you want to identify persons, if you want to recognize emotions, you will need same question. You will need to represent in a relevant way a face. You can, for example, use characteristic points, key points of the face, or you can also to recognize, for example, an emotion. Do this in a black box manner using, for example, CNN. So there is many ways to do so, or you can combine. For example, you can learn the key points of the face and then combine this with a neural network and to learn, for example, possible emotion in a person. And as you may see, as you may think, this task could be difficult because you have to take into account that there is many possible faces, that there is many possible ways to express an emotion. So it is also challenging, but also very interesting task. And it could be also very useful because imagine that you are teaching remotely. If you want perhaps to recognize if people are sad, if people are anxious, if people don't understand what you are saying. So it could be, you can have very practical applications. Okay, so I have people that are specialists in neurosciences. So I won't say anything about that, but I'm quite sure that machine learning could also help, for example, to identify specific zones in the brain. So you can discuss with people of the Marseille team to learn more about that. Okay, so it is just some applications. Now, what are the challenges? So first, in all these applications, the first point is that we have to deal with a lot of data, and the first point is that data may not, in some case, fit in RAM. For example, we may have to deal with data streams. And also, we have also to maybe to use parallel HPC, parallel computing, because classical algorithm won't run in a reasonable time using only one CPU. And second problem, in many cases, we have also to deal with complex data. So I gave the example of text. Text is a complex data because you have to take, it is unstructured data. You have to take into account semantics, that is sense of word. You have to be able to distinguish between short text as tweets or long text. You have to be able also to take into account text with a specific vocabulary. So imagine, for example, that you want to perform information retrieval in scientific literature related to math or related to medicine or whatever. So you have to take into account the fact that the vocabulary is different. And you may also think about graphs. So there is also a lot of people in Marseille who are interested in graph analysis. And this is complex data. So graphs are everywhere in social network, when analyzing chemical molecules. So in many situations, we have to deal with graphs, which are also very, very complex data. So there is several examples where machine learning faces huge challenges as this representation challenge of complex data. Okay, so the machine learning ecosystem is growing more and more. Here is a big pictures of the machine learning ecosystem 10 years ago, and now it is growing more and more. So the reason is that there is many applications, many challenges, and also I think that a strong reason is that anyone can bring his own expertise in machine learning, because if you are a data expert, you can bring your own knowledge of your data. If you are, for example, a guy from the signal processing community, you have some expertise in your data. Maybe you have some idea of how you can represent the data. If you are a computer scientist, maybe you can help on GPU implementation. You can help also, maybe you can think about optimization algorithm. If you are a mathematician, maybe you want to analyze all this machine learning algorithm, try to understand how it works, how it can work better. So it is at the crossroad of many expertise, and I think it is also a reason why there is such a huge increase in machine learning thematics. Okay, so now we are going to share some vocabulary and to explain big pictures of what could be different machine learning problem. So first, there is a question. We said there is a lot of data to analyze, okay? And we have a lot of different data that can be analyzed as time series, graphs, text, images, video, or whatever. And as you may think, the first point is to represent in a relevant way this data. Okay? How can we transform, associate in a meaningful way a numeric vector to each observation, so that after we may answer to a more precise question. So it is a representation problem, which is part of the area of unsupervised learning. And there is a lot of ways to tackle this problem. The first way is to try to use your expert knowledge. And a lot of you in this classroom have an expert knowledge about data. So it is the first way to do so, and maybe you want to use dictionaries, maybe you want to understand what patterns are in the data, and to use it in a relevant way to represent the data. Maybe you want to do so to understand how to represent the data in a black box manner, and I will give you two examples, PCA and TSNE. And in each case, you may also face difficulty. That is, in many cases, you will have to deal with high-dimensional data. So I will give you examples, but for example, in the NLP context, if you have words, words can be represented by word embedding, and word embedding are high-dimensional vectors. which may have 100 of components. Okay, so in many cases, you have high-dimensional data to deal with, and you have to first to represent properly the data, and second, after that, maybe to perform dimension reduction. And maybe after that, you may find some structure in the data, group the data together, for example, find clusters, or maybe you want to represent the data to visualize, so you may be able to explain to a practitioner how the data are structured. Okay, maybe we want to communicate. Imagine that you are in the NLP community and you want to discuss with a guy who is a journalist. If you want to discuss with a journalist, it is not so easy to take your Python code and to say him, okay, let's go, let us use scikit-learn. It is not so easy. So the best way to communicate in some cases is to have relevant pictures, relevant graphics to visualize and to explain. For example, how close are two documents, how close are two newspapers, and to explain it in a practical way, in a way which is an interpretable way. So all these challenges are related to the unsupervised learning problem. Okay, so I gave the example of word embedding. So word embedding, you have different words, and maybe you want to have cluster of words, okay, or cluster of documents. For example, we had a question of a company who wanted to perform information retrieval in a database of patents. Okay, and if you want to explore a database of patents, you need to represent each document, each patent as a vector, and then you want to have a way of clusterize the different patents, a way to explore, for example, the map of patents. So it could be a practical problem. Okay, so there is another problem which is supervised learning, another area. So supervised learning is something else. In this case, you add to your data a target, you add a label, and you want to make a prediction. So for example, imagine that you analyze EEG, and you want to know if people are ill or not, suffers from a disease or not. Your objective could be classify a sentiment in a tweet or whatever. Okay, so okay, I think you know these classical problems: classification and regression. So two classical examples: two toy dataset, the Iris dataset. You want to classify different species of flowers, and the house. The Boston housing dataset, you want to know if the apartment or the house you want to buy is expensive or not. So it is two classical problems. So to summarize, I will in this big pictures I will focus on two questions: unsupervised learning, and I will focus on dimensionality reduction. Okay. I won't speak about clustering. I will also give you some ideas about supervised learning. And there is also other questions, semi-supervised learning. So how can you solve the supervised learning problem if you have, in addition, a large amount of unlabeled data? Okay, so it is also an interesting problem. And there is also reinforcement learning, and you are in the right place to learn about that, since you will have a lecture on reinforcement, devoted to reinforcement learning. Okay, so here I will introduce two main topics. So first topic, I will give you some ideas about what techniques could help to perform dimensionality reduction and why it is useful. And second, I will give you a little ideas about supervised learning. Okay. I hope it will work. Up. Okay, that's great. Okay. So now the idea is to speak about the... Okay, voilà. Right. So the idea is to give you, to present you two basic methods, use the two classical methods used to perform dimensionality reduction. So one you probably already know, which is PCA, and TSNE, and to explain you why it is interesting, why it is useful to reduce dimension. So I come back to word embeddings in NLP. So, okay, so you are not aware of what are word embeddings. So word embedding, you have a word, apple, banana, or whatever. And to this word, you associate a high-dimensional vector. And what you want to have a pictures allowing you to understand how close are two words from each other. Okay. So your pictures should show that apple and banana are very close, and zoo and apple are not. So relevant graphic is that. Okay, so brain activity. So you may have some signals associated to different area of the brain, and maybe you want to classify this different brain map according to the task that people are performing. Okay, so it could be an application. So in this case, the common point is that you have high-dimensional data. Here you have time series, and then if you have time series, it could be high-dimensional. And in each case, you have to deal with this high-dimensional data in a relevant manner, and to be able to visualize or whatever, and represent in a relevant way. Okay, so I will present you, so the question is, as I said, first application could be to visualize or to group in relevant cluster, maybe to identify, for example, cluster of words, cluster of signals, or cluster of images, or whatever, okay? If you have high-dimensional data, it could be difficult. And then I will introduce you with the first classical approach, which is principal component analysis, which is a very basic one, but widely used. Okay. So the idea is that you have high-dimensional data. Here, imagine that you have biological data, which would be high-dimensional. And what you want is to reduce dimension and to lose the less information as possible. So it is here the question. Okay. Okay, so same thing. Okay, so the point is that you want to control the loss of information you may have, and you want to keep clusters and to keep information in your projected data. So it is a classical reduction dimension problem. Okay. So I give, as I said, I give two examples. First example is principal component analysis, and second is TSNE. So the first one is very simple to understand, since it is a linear approach. You have just to perform a SVD, so it is something quite simple. And the second one is a little more tricky, but as you may see, it is much more efficient. So we shall also review this method. So we have two challenges, two dimensionality reduction method. So principal component analysis and TSNE. In each case, we want to preserve the structure of the data. So, in fact, a principal component analysis is a linear method. So, since it is a linear method, it will preserve the global structure of the data, and it will map the data as a whole, since it is linear. Okay? So you take the whole data set, you transform it in a linear manner, and then you get your new data set. And okay, and there is it is widely used at the moment. So in the practical session, I will give you an example on stock market prediction. And they could be also a classical data set used in face recognition. For example, the face solidity data set. Since in fact, when you are looking the face of people, as you imagine, you have characteristic key points. And these characteristic key points can be captured by PCA. So, in fact, the idea is that when you have some basic structure, maybe you can capture it with PCA when you have patterns. And there is a link with the dictionary approach, because imagine that you have, for example, maybe you can recover patterns that may be part of a dictionary, like that. Or maybe you can combine PCA with a preliminary dictionary decomposition. So there is many links, in fact, in this unsupervised manner, in this black box manner of representing data. And what could be a meaningful one, based on practical knowledge using dictionary of whatever, you can combine this, for example, with this method. TSNE has been introduced later, at the beginning of the year 2000. And the idea is to preserve the cluster. In fact, as we may see in the example, PCA is not so good to preserve cluster. Okay, I will show you an example with word embedding, and it is not so good. And then, if we want to preserve cluster, what is interesting is to preserve the local structure of data. And for example, it is quite efficient in the NLP context. But the drawback is that we shall see that is that TSNE is non-linear, and then there could be some difficulty. And the S of SNE means stochastic, so it is not every time you perform TSNE, you may have a different result. So it could also be a drawback of the method. So now I will focus on each method, and I will illustrate in each case with a little Python example. So I think that you have already been said that there is a GitHub with all courses and all Python handbook. Okay, you can go on this GitHub, and there will be a lecture folder, and in the lecture folder you have all the lecture, and also you shall have all Python handbook associated to the lecture. Okay, so you can reproduce experiments, you have also the data, and so on. And after we'll add maybe if you want, I can add after that bibliography, more bibliography, and so on. Okay. Okay, so we already said that. Okay. Now we are considering a classical data set, which is a toy data set. We want to describe different species of leaf, okay? And we want to focus on two variables, and we want to perform, so it is a toy example, when we have only two variables, dimension reduction is not compulsory, okay? It is not the right context, but it is just to have a toy model to understand. So here, in this toy data set, we have some leaves, and this leaf have two parameters. So, in fact, it is the distance between a point of the leaf and its boundary, maximal distance, okay? How long it reflects how long is the leaf. So you imagine Okay, so you imagine that this elongation could be something like that. And here you have something reflected the ratio between area and perimeter of the leaf. So in fact, it is two geometric variables reflecting how the leaf is, the form of the leaf. Okay, and using this form of the leaf, you want to understand if you will be able to distinguish between different groups of leaves. Okay, so I indicate you the UCI machine learning repository. So if in many cases, if you want to play with machine learning method, there is a nice website, which is a UCI machine learning repository, and you can download a data set, and you have all specificity. So for example, you know here that you have a data set with several variables. This is multivariate. You know the number of observations. You know the number of variables. This data set is associated to a task, and you know that there could be some missing values. Okay, so this data set, this website is very useful when you want to play, because you can search, for example, if you want to test a classification for time series, you go to the UCI machine learning repository and you search for that. Okay, so it could help if you just for learning purpose. It is a very useful website. Okay, so here we have this leaf data set, which is stored on the UCI machine learning repository. Okay. Okay, so here I will. It is in the notebook also. So in all the practical session, I will introduce you. I don't know how. What is your knowledge in Python? Have you some basic knowledge of Python or not? You know Python, you know scikit-learn? Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, so if you... Okay, it's an important question, because if you are all aware of scikit-learn, we shall do less basic things. Okay. Okay, that's great. So here I have my data set that I import. Okay, using the pandas library. Okay, and I'm back. Okay. Okay, I have my data set. Okay. Okay, with my observation. Okay, and then I will I represent my observations. So you have your 300 observations, and that you have two variables, and you want to find to transform your data set using only one variable, which could be a linear combination of your two initial variables. And what you want to be able to distinguish the observation as much as possible. Okay, so that you want that your new variable is the more this new variable varies, the best it is. Okay, so you have your leaf data set, and what we want to use only one variable, and we want to separate in the best way the data. Okay, and what we want that the variance of the data is the higher possible, since we want to distinguish between observations. So PCA, as you know, there is several possibilities. Okay, and we have to choose the best one. Okay, so here. Okay, and this thing is not always possible. There is some cases where there is no specific best direction that can be chosen. Okay, so we have our, so we just recall how PCA is done. Okay, behind the PCA you have SVD. So your starting point is your design matrix. Okay, and then, in fact, to find this, to find these specific directions, okay, that will help to represent your data in a lower dimensional space, okay. Basically, what you will do, you will perform SVD. Okay, so is everyone aware about SVD or not? Okay, no problem. Okay. Okay, so you perform SVD, and when you perform SVD, you can sort the singular values, and when you sort your singular values, to which singular values you associate your explained variance ratio, and then when you keep the k-top the k-top eigenvectors associated to these singular values, you have the higher variance from the data. Okay, and then you may like that you may use PCA in many applications. Okay. Okay, so there is several possibilities. You can use centered general PCA, non-PCA, and so on. Okay. Okay, so this is singular value decomposition. Okay, so I will just show you. So if you already used scikit-learn, voilà. Okay, so I don't know if you have already used scikit-learn for your. Have you already used scikit-learn for PCA and so on? So, oui. You are not sharing the right screen. I am not sharing the right screen. Okay. Alors, j'essaie. Ah. Ok, alors attends. Ah, oui. Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, so if you, I don't know, okay, so here you have a toy dataset, which is the iris dataset. You can, if you need, you can refer to the notebook. And the point is that when you perform PCA, okay, if you see the iris dataset, when you perform PCA, what you may see is that you identify clearly groups. Okay, it is okay for visualizing the fact that there is different groups in your dataset. And thereafter, you can try to see if these groups are related to different species of iris, which is more or less the case. Okay, because here you have two species who are mixed together in one cluster. Okay. So it is just to show you how it works. Okay. Okay. Okay, so here to summarize, PCA, the nice thing is that it is interpretable, because we can say that we have, let's say, 40%, 80% of the information. The drawback, as we may see, is that we do not preserve clusters. So even in the simple example of the Iris dataset, you may see that there is two species that are mixed. Okay, so it is not so nice to distinguish between clusters, and it is also sensitive to outliers, and since it transforms everyone in the same way. Okay, so an alternative has been proposed 15 years ago, which is TSNE. So I will explain you that. So I think it could be also interesting. Okay, so TSNE is an extension of a method called SNE, who has been developed 20 years ago by Hinton. And the idea is to define an embedding, define a way, a mapping between a high-dimensional space and a low-dimensional space. And the idea is that we want to preserve neighborhoods. Okay, so we have an idea. In fact, we have our high-dimensional space here, and we want that local neighborhood is preserved. And we want to find a mapping to do so. Okay? So the idea is to find a relevant mapping, not to preserve the global structure, but the local one. And to do so, okay, we shall associate to each observation, we shall associate a probability distribution. Okay? So in fact, the pipeline is the following. You have a way to associate to each observation a probability distribution. Here, in this low-dimensional space, you will also associate in a relevant way a probability distribution. Okay? These things depend on all the data set. These are known. Okay? So you know the coordinate in your high-dimensional space of your observations. Okay? And here, which is unknown, it is the coordinate of your dataset in the low-dimensional space. And what you want, basically, is that this probability are the same. So it is something quite tricky, in fact. So the idea is that we measure, in some sense, the way all observations are distributed around a given point. Okay? And we measure that with the probability. Okay? We do the same. We do both in the high-dimensional space and in the low-dimensional space. And thereafter, we say, to find the coordinate here, the coordinate, if we have a relevant coordinate, these two distributions should be the same. Okay? And it is the trick of SNE. And then there will be several possible choices for this probability, and thereafter we have to explain how we measure the closeness of these two distribution probability. Okay? Alors, first, we explain what is this conditional probability. So this probability, in some sense, it is a measure of it is a way to say how high is the probability that a given point is the neighborhood of the observation XA. Okay? So we first explain that. Okay? So to do so, we use a Gaussian, that is, this probability, it is something okay, of the same exponential. Okay? So we first consider this probability, which is a Gaussian probability. So we have a probability that a point is, the more the point xj is close from this point, the more it is, the higher the probability is. Okay? So in fact, we have a measure. We have to think that we have to think about that as a measure of the proximity. Okay? The maximal proximity is 1, and the more xg is closed in the high-dimensional space of this, the higher this number is. Okay? And you may also do that in the low-dimensional space. Okay? Okay, so here you have several. Okay, so here you have several points, several clusters. What you want to preserve is the local structure that you focus on a point, on an observation, this one, let's say this one. And then you focus on this point, and you want to measure the proximity of this red point, where my hand is, with other points. Okay? And as you may see, you have a probability distribution which indicates you how close are each point of the point xi. And you have this probability distribution. And thereafter, you may do exactly the same in the low-dimensional space. So as soon as you have defined this probability, you can define in an analogous way this one, and thereafter, to find these locations, which are unknown, you are going to solve an optimization problem. You want that these two distributions are as close as possible. And it is the way SNE works. Okay? Any question? Yes? Excuse me? It is by cross-validation. In the initial paper, I think it is a grid search.
You need to repeat the question so that...
Okay, yes. In fact, it's really an interesting question. So in fact, you have a parameter to tune. Okay. In fact, when choosing this probability, this conditional probability distribution indicated here, you have to tune a parameter, which is the variance of each Gaussian. And as far as I remember, in the initial paper, they used grid search, which is a greedy way to do so, but I think they do that. Okay. And in the low-dimensional space, they set all variance equals to 1 to simplify the situation. So there is, in fact, there is no theoretical analysis of this algorithm. It's just empirical evidence that it works not so bad. So maybe it is not optimal. Okay? Okay, so here, now we want that these two distributions are as close as possible. And to measure the closeness between these two distributions, we use Kullback divergence. And then in the initial SNE paper, they were minimizing this Kullback divergence. And as far as I can understand, this minimization is not so easy. So you will learn a lot about optimization this week. And at the end of the week, you will probably know more than me. But as I understand, this objective function is non-convex, and it is quite a difficult function to deal with. So even when you perform gradient descent or stochastic gradient descent, it does not work so well. In fact, it is unstable, and the idea was nice, but SNE has to be improved. And it is the reason why, as you may see also, you are probably aware that Kullback divergence is non-symmetric. Okay, so you have to also take into account this fact, which is not so a good situation, since what you want is, if you want to measure the closeness of xi and xj, you want something which is basically symmetric. Okay, so if it is non-symmetric, it is not so nice, in fact. Okay, so this SNE mapping has been improved, so 15 years ago, by Mattens and Hinton. So I just forgot to indicate use this website, so it is indicated as a subtitle of the frame. So if you want to learn more about TSNE, you have a nice website of Matten who explain everything much better than that I try to do so. And you have his talk, you have also his paper, you have examples, you have everything. And also on the GitHub, I also put some stuff about references and web link and so on. I will add more depending on what you want. But okay, so you can learn more about TSNE if you want, and it is a really nice website. Okay. So TSNE has improved the SNE in several ways. First, there is a symmetrized version of the SNE cost function, and here they defined also, they replace the Gaussian with a student distribution. So I didn't understood all the details, but as far as I understand, there is a problem with the tail of the distribution of the Gaussian, which is too light. I have to check this, but it works better with a student distribution. Okay, but the idea remains the same, and using that, maybe also the optimization problem could be expressed in a simpler way when you calculate the divergence between the two distributions. Okay, and then TSNE is much more performant, much more efficient than SNE. Okay. So I will show you how it works in practice. So how it works in practice, probably you already know this data set, which is also a classical one. So if you consider the digit data set, which is a data set of image of handwritten digit, okay, and you want to understand how we can visualize this data. Okay, so here the question is less silly than with the IRIS dataset, since we have 8 per 8 images, and then we have 64 features. So we are in a more high-dimensional setting. Okay, so here you are really a little high-dimensional. Okay. Okay, so here you have your handwritten digit, and as you may see, there is. Okay, so I think you all know this data set. Okay. And now what we are going to do, we are going to compare PCA and TSNE on this data set. Okay, so. Alors, we know when to compare these two datasets. Okay, so we have our dataset digit, and then we first test PCA. Okay, so we use scikit-learn and we transform our digit dataset using PCA. Okay, and now what we want to do, we want to visualize. Okay, so if you use PCA, there is no, even if you don't know the label of each observation, at first glance, you cannot see what is a 1, what is a 2. Okay, PCA does not seem very efficient because you cannot really distinguish between the digit, or what you want is to have your claim is that you will have 10 clusters, but it is not the case here. You have not 10 clusters. Okay, and then if you try to visualize, to add the label, it is quite puzzling, because here you have one digit which are here. The sixth digit, the digit 6, seems to be quite well represented, 4 more or less. So the situation is not really clear. Okay, when you see that, PCA, at least when using only 2 components, doesn't seem an efficient dimension reduction procedure. Okay. Okay. And now we compare with TSNE. Okay. So TSNE, we do exactly the same. Okay, so you have the nice point is that you have everything in scikit-learn. So when you use your scikit-learn library, everything is in it. Okay. So here you perform TSNE. Okay. You do exactly the same. And when you do that, you do exactly the same thing. A nice point is that you have really 10 clusters. Even if I don't know which cluster it is, I'm really glad because I have very different clusters. Okay? And when using TSNE, even if it is black box and whatever, I can explain to a practitioner, I can explain to a guy who is, if I show to someone who is not a data scientist, when I show him this picture, I am glad. I can discuss with him. If I say to my 7-year-old son, here is the digits, he will be puzzled. Okay? I cannot explain him what is the difference between a 1, a 2, whatever. Whereas in this case, the situation is nice, and I can really, distinguish between numbers. So, as you may see, here for digit is not so relevant, okay, because the digit we can see easily how different are digits, even unwritten digits. But you may imagine that if you want to discuss and to discuss with people, for example, from the NLP community or from humanities, or people from which are, for example, psychologists or whatever, people who are not going to use scikit-learn, who are not going to use TSNE, and who just want to be able to communicate, to explain, to present their data set to other people, okay? If you are going to present a data set like that and to explain that there is different group, you can do it easily with TSNE. So it is a great improvement. And in many situations, here I show you a toy example, as usual, but in many situations, you may see that there is, it is much more efficient TSNE than PCA. Okay, so it is just a silly example of 2-dimensional reduction methods. There is many others, in fact. Okay. Okay. Okay, voilà. Okay, so we have our two examples. As you may see, this picture is not the same as the pictures that I have showed you, that I have shown, because TSNE is a stochastic procedure. Okay, so for each run, you have a different visualization. So be aware of that. TSNE is nice because you can visualize. For example, we used it in LLP because we want to discuss with people of Canceropol Est about different scientific publication in the oncology domain. Okay, and TSNE was really useful for that, because we can show them that there is different kind of publication, that there is a different interest, that there is maybe a different scientific community. So it was interesting from this point of view. But there is something quite strange. It is that this randomness of the procedure, and that each time you have a new visualization. Okay? Yes? Yeah, exactly. You will find, in each case, for example, you will find a cluster for the digit 1, the digit 2, etc. Yes, but the cluster remains the same, but the way they are distributed in the low-dimensional space is different. The localization is different, yes? The reason is random because there is a stochastic, I think that it is in the stochasticity when you solve the optimization problem, I think. Yeah, you use a stochastic, more or less a stochastic gradient descent, and then you find this, but this is stochastic. Oui? Ah, yeah, right. Okay. In fact, it is not clustering. TSNE is something different of clustering. Okay, we can deduce a clustering, for example, for such visualization. But TSNE is not a clustering. In fact, you just reduce the dimension. TSNE is this mapping, is a mapping from a high-dimensional space to a low-dimensional space. It is a mapping, okay? So, and this mapping, in many cases, this mapping preserves clusters. But it is not a clustering. You can, after that, perform clustering. But it is not a clustering in itself. Okay, so does it end? Okay, so, perfect. Okay, so to conclude about the pros and cons of TSNE, okay, so the idea is to have a mapping that preserves the structure of the data. Okay, it works quite well comparing to other techniques as PCA. Okay. And in fact, as you may see, you may have different results each time, and it is quite long to run because you have the optimization problem to solve is a costly optimization problem. You have to minimize the sum of Kullback divergence and so on. So it is something quite huge. It is not so easy. PCA, it is something quite fast. You just perform SVD, and that's it. It is not the case for TSNE. And in fact, as you said, you have this hyperparameter, you have hyperparameters to run, to tune. So it is quite long, in fact. Okay? So in silly example, in the labs, we shall see a small example, okay, small silly example, so that it is not too long. But it can be much more costly comparing to PCA, in fact. Okay, any questions? Yes?
What are the hyperparameters that you have to tune? Those who characterize the...
Yeah, those who characterize the distribution, in fact. Yeah. Mm. And it could be the parameters, for example, of the HDD also.
And you have as many parameters as you have.
Exactly, yes. In fact, the idea is that when you have PCA, you know the linear transform. You know that, for example, to give you to explain a little more, for example, when you have PCA, you know that you have kept 80% of the information, for example. It is not the case with TSNE. TSNE, when you have two components, the result is nice. You can say it is nice. But you cannot say, I have 20%, 30%, 40% of the observation. I don't know what these axes are representing. For example, when I have a PCA, the first component, the first principal component makes sense. You know what it is. Here, it is something nice. Okay, it's just it could help to have a nice way to represent data, but you don't know what is the meaning, the true meaning of your component, for example. For example, when you have, imagine that in signal processing, you have many signals, and you have the two first components. You know that, for example, the two first component could be the two first atoms of a dictionary, because each signal can be represented. You keep, for example, 30% of the information when you consider these two first components, and you can express as each signal as a linear combination of your two first components, plus some. And it is not the case here, because it is non-linear. So you have something, and this mapping, you don't know it. In fact, it is just a strange mapping. You have no explicit expression of your mapping, which is not the case with PCA. Okay? Yes? Okay?
Does it mean that when I have a new sample, I cannot project the new sample with the mapping?
Yes, that's right.
You need to repeat the question so that people...
Yes, that's right. Yes, it is a good question. In fact, when you add a new observation, you have to rerun the whole stuff. It is not an online process. And comparing to PCA, when you have PCA, maybe there is some online TSNE algorithm. I'm not aware of that, but it is exactly what you said, because when you have PCA, since you know the transformation, it is quite easy. You can when you have new data, you add it and that's it. It is not the case here. So it is really a drawback, yes.
Bouge pas.
I don't know if it's I don't know.
I don't know if it works.
I don't know if it's a very clever question, actually, so I don't want to use the microphone.
But you are a star. Don't be afraid.
It's just actually, so you, as far as I understand, you seem to see that the lower dimensional space, you don't know it.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't even have parameters to.
No, because it is a result.
It's not computed. It's not
exactly.
computed.
It is a result of a tedious computation and.
And then your feature, I mean the points in the low dimensional space, you don't even know how you get it.
No, you solve an optimization problem, but you don't know the mapping. If you want to know the mapping, you don't have it in an explicit way. In fact, your mapping is something that x1 of a cost function. So it is not a mapping. It is not something you cannot do anything with that. But you can visualize, but you cannot do what you can do with PCA. Yes.
We should plug a non-parametric additional step to understand the mapping indeed. We run first.
Yeah.
We first run TSNE and then do something with another blackboard diffeomorphism association. I don't know, to try to understand how, from one state how to pass to the final state. Maybe. I don't know.
What do you want to do? Yes, I know that there is things. There is a way to make interpretable black box, but I don't know if it is so easy here. I don't know. In fact, we shall try to speak a little about interpretability in the labs, but I don't know how you can mix that, because in fact, for interpretability, in some cases, what you try to do, you try to see what is the impact of a change, for example, in the features. But here, since it is visual, I don't know what it will do. I don't know. Okay.
There is a question on the board, and I'm not sure I understand it. But one could expect that numbers 1, 7, or 3 and 8 could be mistaken because they're close, I guess.
Ah, yes, I understand your point. Oh, thanks, Laurent.
You need to repeat the question then, because you understood it.
I think that the question is that when you are considering unwritten digits, probably you have ever seen that. I will show you. Okay, I will show you. I hope it is right. It is in the mind of Laurent. But in fact, when you are writing in an American manner, when you are writing a 7, sometimes you are writing 7 like a 1, and it could be the same for 8 and 3. If you are a baby or a little silly, little 5-year-old children that is learning to write. When he's learning to write the number 3, it could be really close from 8. So I understand the question of Laurent, which is, in fact, the 1 on 7 and 3 and 8 should be close from each other. So I don't know if it is the case in the clusters. I hope so. Well, yes, it is a little. It is a little. Yes, it is a little. Look. Yeah, exactly. 3, there is a part of the cluster of 3 which is close to the part of a cluster of 8. And when I'm comparing, not so clear. And when I am comparing 1 and 7, this is not convincing. Yes, I understand. Yes, I understand your point, and you are right, Laurent. Yes, it should be close from each other, and it is surprising that it is not the case. Yes. In fact, I was glad, but I shouldn't have been glad. So thank you. Thank you for your question, Laurent. Okay. No other question? Yes?
Yes. So you have to choose the dimension of the target space.
Yeah.
And how is it done in practice?
How is it done? If you want to visualize, you choose 2. But for PCA, you know that you want to keep, let's say, 40 or 50% of the information. So you perform the SVD, and you use your explained variance ratio to choose the number of components. For TSNE, I think maybe you can evaluate, for example, using you can evaluate by the task, maybe, the TSNE embedding, for example. For example, if you want after that to perform a clustering, the more your clustering is efficient, the more you choose this number of components, for example. But you need something else to be able to choose, and it could be quite costly. But I think if I had to choose, for example, for my scientific publication, the number of components, I will try to cluster my data or to evaluate in another way, for example, in a classification task. And thereafter, I will choose my number of components, evaluating by usual metrics. Do you think it could be time for coffee?
It's definitely time for coffee then.
Merci.